So hello everyone and welcome to the Climate Solution Days session titled Overview of Tribal Cask Partnerships in the North Central Region. My name is Stefan Tangent. I'm a Tribal Climate Resilience Liaison. I work to connect climate change resources to tribal nations across the North Central region. I work directly for the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance, and I work in coordination with the North Central Cask. Today, I'm joined by two presenters, James Rattling Leaf Sr. and Mark Junker, whom I'll introduce momentarily. Our session today will cover three very different projects involving tribal resource managers and the North Central Climate Adaptation Science Center, or NCCASC. Our goal in this session is to give you, and folks that watch this later, hopefully, a clear picture of the way in which we work with tribal partners to address their climate change related concerns. We will highlight some key points about working with tribal nations, one of which is trying to meet folks where they are at. Each of the presenters will discuss kind of the history and context of their project to highlight this effort. Tribal nations are one of the three priority partners for the Climate Adaptation Science Centers nationally. At the NCCASC, we have a tribal engagement strategy, which prioritizes several ways to address climate change on tribal lands by supporting our tribal partners. We recognize it's incredibly valuable to highlight what various tribes are doing to address climate change. This type of peer-to-peer learning is done through webinars like this, through our newsletter, and directly when we interact with our tribal partners. The three project examples we're going to discuss today will really highlight the different ways NCCASC brings resources to support tribal climate adaptation. Mark will talk about his climate workshop series and exposing tribes in the lower Missouri River to climate change resources and options. James will discuss the climate adaptation planning effort at Rosebud Sioux Tribe. And I will discuss a research project with Butte Mountain U to combine Western science and traditional ecological knowledge. So we really hope this session is useful to you all, provides a kind of a window into how we try to be useful to our tribal partners in the North Central region. Just a few things before I introduce our first speaker. We definitely encourage you to participate throughout the webinar. If you have questions or feedback about the information, please share it via the chat, or you can speak up at the end when all three presenters have gone. And we'll save some time at the end for this purpose to chat, hear your feedback, or if you want to ask questions. Also, a couple of tips just to get the most out of the session. We suggest turning off your email and silencing your phone. Remove distractions. Zoom meetings are challenging, and getting through them by paying direct attention can really help. Actively engage in the presentation, ask questions, and give feedback. So kind of two key things we hope that you will do to get the most out of the session. All right. With all that being said, our first speaker is Mark Junker. Mark has been the tribal response coordinator for the Second Fox Nation of Missouri and Kansas and Nebraska since 2014. He holds a master's in curriculum, the BA in history and social science from Peru State College. As a TRP, he created both the Sac and Fox emergency response and multi-hazard mitigation plan. Mark also serves on a tribal infrastructure task force addressing barriers to sustainable solid waste programs, and participates in the Tribal Superfund Working Group and the Interstate Technology Regulatory Council as a member of the Advanced Site Characterization Tools team. So Mark, I'm going to share the screen for you. Let me know if that does not come up, somebody.
There you go.
And take it away.
All right. Well, hey, thank you, Stefan. Really glad to be here. My name is Mark Junker, and I've been dealing with climate for about the last 6 years. It was something that came to our attention through some of our different EPA programs, water and air specifically. And at the time, my tribal response program, which was dealing a lot with brownfields, didn't have a lot to do, and I just had time to investigate what the potential impacts and risks that climate change face, not only to my program, but to the community at large. And the more information I found, the more information I realized we needed. And it was one of those kind of snowball situations where I was really hungry for information. People were eager to share it when they had it. and some of the colleagues in similar positions in the other tribes in Kansas, specifically the Prairie Band Potawatomi and the Kickapoos and the Iowas.
Hey, Mark, will you speak up? You got really quiet all of a sudden.
Oh, sorry. Is this a little better?
That's a little bit better.
All right, and the other tribes in Kansas were all real eager to learn more too. And one of the first topics that we discuss is, we're going to have all this information coming in. What are we going to deal with it? How is it going to impact sacred sites? What are we going to do with all the data? And how do we deal with sharing it, storing it, and giving access to people the various information that we have. So our first activity was a data and ethics workshop, which we hosted on May 4th of 2016 down at the Prairie Band Potawatomi in Mayetta, Kansas. And that was attended by about 50 people, representing not only the tribes, but some of the federal agencies also were interested in what we were doing because they really hadn't seen this type of activity before. And so FEMA and EPA, the state of Kansas, the water office there, NOAA, were all real active in the questions that we posed, as far as what data do we need, where are we going to keep it, and who is going to be allowed to access it. And so this data and ethics workshop really got the wheels turning. And from that point, we sought out a grant that would allow all 4 Kansas tribes to do some water planning. And it was through the BIA. And we had asked for about $35,000 just to kind of get a hold of the situation, do a little communication with community members and get some feedback. And the grant process was a little bit strange in that we asked for $35,000. We were given about $7,000. We redid our plan, and then when that plan was accepted, they gave us about $57,000 more. All in all, this grant had about $85,000 to deal with planning, and we started looking at our watersheds, especially the major rivers. We had some aerial photography done of all the major water sources for the reservations, and we're still actually dealing with that data at this particular time. I just now got a PO approved to have this imagery put into like poster forms, and it's going to allow the tribes to tell their story of the waterways on their reservations, and hopefully they'll put them in their environmental departments, maybe even show them at museums. Each tribe will be able to contribute as much or as little information to the project as they want, and they're really in control of what they want to share at this particular point. The data itself is owned by us, and they can decide who they want to disseminate it to. We won't disseminate it to anybody other than them, and that's a huge aspect of working together with tribes, because each one has a different idea of how their data needs to be shared and with who they want to share it with. And the project was really successful. We started making climate summaries, and I'll put in the chat a site where you can access those summaries. The High Plains Regional Climate Center has put together a climate dashboard, which was another aspect of the grant that allowed us to look at tribal-centric data. That's data that we collect, as well as data that's collected by the state and federal government outside the reservation, allowing us to get a better picture of how climate is going to impact us. The next grant we got was for workshops, and the grant called for 5 different workshops to occur over a 2-year period. And the first workshop was going to deal with gathering a team that would be able to start the process of creating climate adaptation plans. So it was a climate adaptation resilience grant, and all the tribes in EPA Region 7, which would be Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, and Missouri, were on board with this. And so the first meeting was in Reserve, Kansas, where we put together these tribal technical teams, and James Radlingleaf was the driving force behind that first workshop as we looked at getting, environmental professionals, workers from different departments within the tribe, students and youth and elders, combining them all into a team that would look at the various aspects of climate and how it's going to impact everything from housing to roads and maintenance to administrative duties. And so the tribal technical teams took place over 2.5 days in Reserve. And one of the things we needed to grasp and grapple with is all the different tribes were at a different starting point in the process. And so each team was equipped with Surface Pros, with all the software that we would need. And every place we went, we were able to bring internet. And most of the facilities that we're at now do have it, but back then it was something that wasn't as common as it is today. So the tribal technical teams happened in June, and then in the fall we did, in November we did a training called Drought Early Warning Systems, and we did that up at the Santee Reservation on the South Dakota-Nebraska border. And at that point in time, we were really finalizing the data sets that we wanted. We were looking at standard precipitation indexes, some of the 8 to 10 day forecasts, soil moisture, both forecasts and historical data, the drought monitor, things that would allow us to get a really good picture of what's happening with the climate and comparing it to those 30-year norms. And each tribe has their own particular data set that they find most valuable to them. For us, it's 21 different data points across 17 different platforms that we look at every Thursday. In the past couple weeks, we've really skirted the fringes of drought. Some of the other tribes farther out west are dealing with it a lot more severely than we are, but we're at the stage where we need to start looking at, hey, things are drying out. What are the next steps? So we did that in November, and then in March of 2020, we decided to do a climate summary workshop that happened on St. Patrick's Day up at Winnebago. And right in the middle of that conference, the entire state of Iowa shut down due to COVID. The governor closed all the hotel rooms. We were kicked out of our hotel room at lunch, and we had begun making some remote learning alternatives available to all our tribal members, because only about a third of the tribes actually attended in person due to travel restrictions. And the climate summary workshop was cut, short midway. And from that point in time, we decided that rather than doing a climate summary workshop, we would transfer all this knowledge into the climate dashboard, which I posted on the link there. And that's the climate dashboard. There's ways to access the tribes in both Iowa, Nebraska, and Kansas. There's 3 different menu options, and you can look through all the data sets that we use there. And then the last workshop that we had was looking at maps, realizing that communicating our knowledge is going to be done a lot with maps, and we need to be able to create our own maps. And the Esri platform is absolutely fantastic. It's also very difficult unless you have that specific skill set to do. The people that do that in Indian country are few and far between. And when you do find them, they're usually with some of the larger tribes that have just amazing mapping capacity. We tried to do ours using Google Maps. That also makes it really easy to communicate the data that we collect, the places that we're reporting on with community members, simply by sharing links. The data itself, for the most part, is accessible. The maps would probably look a lot more professional in an Esri or ARC platform, but we're dealing with what we know how to do now. And this is a picture of us up at the Ponca facility in Norfolk, Nebraska, their transit building. They were extremely gracious hosts, and we spent 2.5 days there really digging into the data, putting out maps. And our next workshop will be in September, the week of September 19th. We don't know whether the Norfolk was so good, we may do it there again, but the Prairie Band Potawatomi have also asked if they could host that final workshop where the tribes will come together with their laptops, and it will be more of a retreat, because when we leave, we'll have adaptation plans in place. And right now we're looking at potentially extending the working group that we have with another grant, and we'll hopefully have something submitted by the summer. And I guess I could talk a little bit about the picture up here. This is one of the reasons that the adaptation plan will benefit us, because you see a road here. They're the exact same road. You can tell by the sign for the left-hand curve. But this is the road that accessed our bison pasture. And in just a matter of hours, it was completely underwater. And, it's not a minimum maintenance road, but it's the next closest thing. And so access to the buffalo is quite often cut off. And this one in May wasn't quite as severe, for the simple fact that the bison have some pasture in May, but this also happened about 5 months earlier, where there was no pasture. The flooding in the winter is a direct consequence of climate change. And so being able to deal with this in a logical, planned out manner is something that's going to benefit the tribe, its culture, and ultimately the bison.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mark. Here's a couple other slides of
Yeah,
waterways.
this is Walnut Creek. That is our the western boundary of our reservation. One of the aspects of climate change is rapidly deteriorating stream banks, and so one of our goals is to improve stream banks and stream quality throughout not just Walnut Creek, but all the creeks of the reservation.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mark. One thing I wanted to mention was Mark's model for doing the workshops of bringing together nearby tribal nations and working together through a workshop series is something that we've copied throughout the region. So we try to do it with the Dakota tribes, and it's something we're in the middle of with the Ute tribes in the Southwest. So we definitely copied and pasted Mark's model because of how effective it has been. So we appreciate what you've done, Mark. And we've got a couple questions that we'll just hold to the end.